Folk number 105 is Shane Webcke. Shane is one of a number of folks to have been born on the Darling Downs and is widely recognised as one of the greatest front rowers to have played the game. Shane Webcke made his State of Origin debut for Queensland in 1998, going on to play 21 consecutive games. He also played 3 games for Queensland in the Super League Tri-Series in 1997. Shane was a member of 4 Brisbane Broncos premiership-winning sides and has the distinction of winning the club's best and fairest on 2 occasions, and in 2007 was named one of the greatest 20 Broncos players of all time. Shane Webcke also captained Queensland, leading the side in Game 1 of the 2004 series.
Well, Shane Webcke, thanks for your time. What does it mean to you to be a Fog?
I guess, like the entirety of my professional rugby league career, it means an enormous amount to me because, like a lot of kids in Queensland, I grew up in country Queensland, and rugby league was the thing that we all loved and aspired to do, and all the rest of it. And I probably was a bloke who got to that level, whom when I was younger, many wouldn't have thought that would be the case, and not because of talent or anything like that. I don't think it's just that didn't sort of roll my way, but that I got to play for Queensland was an astounding thing because it's the first Queensland side I ever made. And as a kid growing up, and that's what took me away from thinking that I could be a rugby league player, because I never made a Queensland side. And when you're a kid in Queensland, to make a Queensland side, underage sides I'm talking about, or a school side, that means they're going somewhere. And kids are astounded when I tell them, if I go to talk to younger people about rugby league now, the first Queensland side I ever played for was a Queensland State of Origin side, so which made it all the more special. And why it means a lot to me too is like the era, like everyone loves their own era, but I stepped into, Chris Close being the manager, and just the magic of Origin was punching along then. And not that it hasn't always, but I just felt like it was an amazing experience, and I'll always be grateful that it was mine to have. And I'll always consider myself lucky that I got the opportunity.
Well, let's go back to the start. Like a lot of your fellow Fogs, you're from regional country Queensland. What was life like for Shane Webcke growing up in Leyburn?
Oh, mate, Leyburn, as people from there like to call it.
Okay, my apologies.
No, mate, the most idyllic childhood, the way I look at it, right? But if the reality is if we look at the reality of it. So I was born in 1974, which meant by the time I was growing up in Leyburn, we were a sheep and wool place, right? And anyway, the world had changed. Interest rates went ballistic, and price of fuel and everything, a bit like we're going through now. But what that meant was a lot of hardship for a lot of people, and everyone around us did it tough, which meant that you didn't notice it. And so whilst we didn't have a lot of the material things that other kids would have today, and they would look at our lives, my kids had to grow up the way I grew up. They think it was their throats were being cut. But for us, it was brilliant. We grew up in a country town. We rode our bikes to school. We had freedom. We had all the things that mattered. And whilst we didn't have a lot of material things, we had warm beds, full stomachs, and parents who loved us, and parents who took us to rugby league. And so we had everything. And so when I look back at the way I grew up, I thank the good Lord above that it was the case, because it did a lot of things, gave me resilience, gave me all of that, which comes from having that sort of upbringing. But central to our existence was the game of rugby league. And I fell in love with it when I was a kid, and I've never fallen out of love with it.
How did you start?
So, my mum, so I was a particularly bad-tempered young child, and at about 5 or 6 years old, Mum decided that, okay, let's take him over to play rugby league, because that's a team sport, and look, we all understand what team sports are. That'll teach me that there's something more important than just me, because I've got a team around me. And so she'd take me over there, and I'd learn to not lose my temper. It didn't work. And I remained bad-tempered for the rest of my life, and still am.
So what was the junior rugby league landscape like in those days?
It was brilliant.
Who'd you play against? What were the teams?
So we were Alra Clifton Bulldogs, which was obviously the towns of Alra and Clifton and Leyburn, that little district. So we played in the Warwick and District competition. Warwick had 2 sides. They had suburbs and collegians. There was also Millmerran, there was Texas, there was Gundawindi, and there was Stanthorpe. And honestly, it was brilliant. And I was very fortunate. Our club, there was a cluster of kids who played at our club in our age group. So like all country clubs, I suppose still, we had to skip a grade because we didn't have enough kids. So, you'd have under 10s and under 12s. So when you're 11, you play with the under 12. So that's how it went all the way through. On the first year, so when I was the young one, when I was actually playing, so I was under 10s and I was 10 years old. So that side, we had a really, really good side, really good kids who all stayed together. All the way through junior league, we stayed together. And when we had to play with the older side, so when we were the young ones and that was also a very good side, but it was a particularly good side. We made the grand final every year, and every year we won it, all the way through junior footy. And then I played an under-18 grand final, and we won that. And then I came to the Broncos, and we made 4 grand finals, and we won all those. So when people say that you've got to know how to lose one to win one, they're lying, because I'm the opposite. But I guess all of that I say because the junior league that we had was magnificent. And we had magnificent parents who took us everywhere. And you had to travel, and we would be on buses to do so. And sometimes you go on the bus, sometimes you go with mum and dad. And playing country rugby league is brilliant because it's a whole Saturday. You don't just go and play your game. You watch everybody else's, and then we play footy afterwards. You'd end up at somebody else's house playing footy, and that was our life. And it was so good. And I think, that's what I really think why rugby league players really love rugby league. Which again, I suppose it's no different for other sports. But when you're a country kid in Queensland and you grow up in a rugby league district, it's everything. It was our whole lives, and by geez, I loved it.
How did you then come to the attention of the Brisbane Broncos?
So I think it was the great Cyril Connell saw me at an under-17 carnival here at Suncorp at Lang Park, and he must have saw something in me. But I had, via somebody else, become a Broncos scholarship player when I was about 15. And whatever that meant, I didn't know, because I never took advantage of whatever that meant. I had a piece of paper. I still got the piece of paper at home. It's the only piece of paper I own to do with footy that my father was alive to see, and he signed it. And so it's the only thing that he ever saw of me ever become a Bronco. And anyway, so I don't know what that scholarship bit meant. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I lived up to what you're meant to be. And as I said earlier, the first Queensland side I ever played in was the State of Origin side, which meant I was in the wilderness for quite some time in terms of rugby league. And I, whilst I had made the attention of the Broncos, I hadn't captured it, if that makes sense. Until one day, Wayne Bennett was coming up to Toowoomba to watch a game. He was coming up to watch that game because we were playing, that was the under-18 grand final, which we won. And anyway, we were playing Newtown. So when you get out of juniors and into seniors, we went into the Toowoomba competition. So we were playing under-18 grand final. There's a bloke in the other team called Stephen Price, who had very much captured the attention of both the Broncos and a host of other clubs. So it's no surprise to anyone that Wayne Bennett was going to the game, and it was no surprise why he was going to the game. It was a given that Pricey was going to go and play, somewhere. It was not a given that I would. And so, like everybody else, I knew it was going there, but I didn't care. By that stage, I'd sort of fallen out with the idea that I was ever going to be anything, so I just turned up and played the game. 2 things happened that day. We won the grand final. We hadn't beaten them throughout the season, I don't think. So we really weren't meant to win. We did. And Wayne Bennett didn't sign Stephen Price. He signed me. And that was no greater surprise that was a great surprise to everyone, but none greater than me, because I did not see it coming. And so I tell that story, and I've told Pricey this, I tell that story, if you go to a function somewhere and people ask you, how'd you get, I tell it everywhere, because Pricey really wanted to be a Bronco, and he never was.
How did that change you then, or your mindset? What was, if you went to play that grand final with no aspirations, then all of a sudden the Broncos want you to come and play for them, how did that affect you?
Well, that was a problem, see, because that meant leaving my little world up there and coming here to Brisbane. And I was not prepared for that. But also what I wasn't prepared for. So Pricey, obviously, picked up with the Bulldogs. He's always going somewhere. But he expected it, right? So I feel like that makes you a little bit more aware of it, because you're anticipating something, so you do a bit of research. And I'm sure he did. And I'm sure then he was more prepared for the fact, because he had to go to Sydney. But I'd done nothing, and I hadn't thought about it. and it had not been on my radar. But the only thing that I did know, all of my mates had aspired to have this opportunity, and it had fallen in my lap. So I knew it was important, but I just didn't know how to go about it. And to be honest, I came down here. Well, a couple of mistakes were made. The first of which, I moved in with my best mate, who had grown up on the farm beside us. And it was with him and his brother and a mate, like his brother was going to uni, so there's mates. Anyway, I remember the place that I first came to was in Nunda. And back then, Nunda was a little bit lower, sort of socio-economic, whatever it was. But anyway, I'll never forget our little unit, because you'd knock on the door and a cockroach would answer it. It was not the most sanitary sort of place. It's because of the way we live, not because of the building. Anyway, the problem was with that is that it was the first time all of us had our freedom away from home. So what do a mob of country boys living in the city do? Well, we all had jobs. I was working for a bank back then, would you believe? And so we'd all get paid fortnightly. So on the fortnight that we got paid, well, what did we do? Went to the pub, spent the lot. And so we'd probably have 2 or 3 days where we paid our rent, we went to the pub, we ate pretty well. But then for the rest of the fortnight, it was like bread and water. So hardly conducive to a professional rugby league career. But the other side of it was, and I wasn't a player as such. I was playing for a feeder club, and so, but shortly after that, I did become in the actual playing thing. And the simple thing was, I didn't know what it took. I didn't have a clue, and I valued it though. So I was trying to run on my own and do things. But I'd equate with going with a half run, half walk, 5 kilometre type thing. I'd think that was evening out, like drinking a carton of Stubbies and eating KFC and all, which it just doesn't, and you know that later on, but I didn't know it then. And I was basically failing. And I was basically, I'd played the year at Brisbane Brothers it was, got in the second year, and they actually signed me. The club actually then took me into be part of the club. Actually, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. I was playing for Brisbane Brothers. We were the under-21 side, I think, but playing as a first-grade side in Brisbane, and the Brisbane competition. And halfway through the whole thing, I was failing, and I was going to be gone.
What changed?
My dad was killed, and that changed everything. Got a phone call on the 21st of June 1994. It was the morning after the second State of Origin in '94. And the phone rang, and I thought it was my mates on the drink somewhere. I wish it had been. It was my mum, and she told me that Dad was killed in an awful industrial accident. And it changed me in a way of perspective, not of me suddenly thinking that I'm going to do this for my father and that. My dad wasn't that sort of man, and we're not that sort of people. So it wasn't about that. Although he loved our game, and would have been thrilled to see all that went on after he went. But when you're a kid, and I was a kid, I was only 19, people don't die like your grandparents die, because that's what happens. People get old and they die. And so I'd never known anyone to die suddenly or anything like that, or young. And then I lost my dad. And it just made me think, it just made me understand, well, not understand, but it gave me a perspective of, you know what, when I came back to Brisbane, this is not the most important thing that's ever going to happen to me. It's footy. And so I just went out and started playing for the same reason I'd always played footy, because I loved it. And in those days, because of what had happened to Dad, it was 80-odd minutes where I didn't have to think about what had happened to him. And whatever Wayne saw in me the day that he came to Toowoomba, came back. And by the end of that year, I'll never forget this, because Tony Durkin, the great Tony Durkin, he'd written a little thing in the League Week, which the League Week, as you recall, was the
Bible?
It was the Bible. So if you got your name in there, it meant something. So he wrote, and I got my name in there, a little par like this it was. But Durko was doing a thing around the grounds of all the clubs about players to watch. And he put my name in there as one to watch the Broncos. And it lit a fire in me, because I thought, maybe I can do this. And everything that I thought might have happened with my family and with my father from an agricultural point of view was over. And so there was no plan B anymore. So I thought, bugger it, I'll have a crack at this footy.
And a fair side at the time, and particularly good front rowers around as well. Was that
it was pretty handy.
Yeah. Was that a key part of your development, being around quality front rowers and forwards?
Being around the Broncos was a key part of it, because everyone was, you know, it's a very different club today, and the professionalism has moved on in leaps and bounds. But the Bronx were a club who competed all the time at everything, and that's what I learned. And what I learned and how I learned it, and I've told this story 1,000 times, so I'll tell it again. So I didn't know how to improve. When I said I read my name and Tony Deacon said that, I didn't know what it meant then to take the next step, and I wasn't going to ask anyone. I wouldn't ask Wayne a thing. Anyway, I thought about, like, we used to do the Gap run out at Inoggera to the Gap Reservoir out there. Anyway, we used to go. In the old days, you'd go and do a 10-kilometre run on a Friday afternoon, the whole club. That's how you trained. They'd never do something like that now. Anyway, the thing about it is that it's got this massive hill at the start. There's a little saddle before you then start climbing the main part of it. And so, like typical country kids, I suppose, you're not used to training like it means something. It's like you got tired, you have a little rest. So anyway, this first little saddle, it was a natural place to take a little break, which the great Kelvin Giles, who was the fitness bloke at the Broncos at the time, he understood that about particularly country boys. So he was hiding in the scrub one day, and I won't use the language, but he assured us and the couple of country blokes I was with that at the Broncos, when we get tired, we don't stop, we keep going. And that was in my head from the year before. I thought, right, I can't run this properly. I'm going to learn to run it properly. So in the off season, where we're all meant to do nothing, I went to work on this thing. And I went out there, if not every day, most days. And I didn't know, if this is not some revelation of where I worked it all out, I didn't know it was going to help me. I just thought I'm doing something, and it feels like it's in the right direction. Anyway, I ran it. And anyway, that's it. There's no measure. I just knew I could run it better. So then, come back in on the first Friday of pre-season training, and we're going out there to do this run. And I thought to myself, I'm going to learn something here today. I'm going to learn I've really helped myself. I'm going to learn that I was the only bloke who wasn't at the pub, because that's mostly what everybody else was doing. Anyway, we start this run, and all the forwards do it together. The whole complement of the forwards of the Broncos, which goes from like your under 8, whatever the younger grades were, all the way through the first grade, all run together. And so we'd be handicapped because the backs are quicker apparently. So off we'd go, and I'm running along, and I'm just running within myself, see, and I'm thinking, because the one thing, even back then, as it is, it's alive and well as the tall poppy thing, you don't want to be the smart ass leading, right? So I'm just running along within myself. Anyway, then the backs come through. I thought, oh, okay. And we're starting to spread out a bit. And so I thought, righto, well, I can tack on the back of this. So anyway, long story short, we run the whole thing. Now, I've rewritten a bit of history sometimes when I tell this story and say that I won the whole thing. I don't think that's actually true, but I went pretty close. And that's what gave me my footy career that day. And it's this simple. Because that day I worked out this. If I was willing to work hard when others wouldn't, then I could win. And forevermore. And I lived by that. I lived by that creed the whole of my footy career. On days off, I would go out and I'd pick a hill somewhere and I'd run. And in the end, I worked out what it was. It had nothing to do with the physical attributes. I learned to be a very good trainer after that, because I just knew that do the work. And I'd come from a working background. I knew how to work. I just didn't know how to work in that way. Once I worked it out, then I just attacked it. And then every day off, I'd always go run to do it, and not for the physical attributes, for what I did up here. Because what I could do then, because most clubs run the same regimes, I always felt like I could, run on the field. I could look across at my opposite and think, mate, you weren't doing what I was doing on Thursday. You were having a day off. I can be better than you today. Sounds stupid, but it worked. And it didn't always work out either. Like some days you had the bad days, but I knew sticking to that routine was the thing. And I actually thought I invented it. It wasn't very long after that. Like I made my first grade debut, and look, my footy career I was lucky the whole way through with how it went. But I very quickly made an Australian side, and we went to England. And anyway, you land in England and you have the acclimatisation, which is code for try and drink every pub in England dry. Anyway, then I picked the day. I was in Leeds in Northern England. You know what that's like, cold and misty and foggy and everything. And anyway, I picked a day where I reckon we're about a day away from going to train and getting to work. And I thought, I'm going to go out this morning. And the thing about it is, if you want this little system to work, it's got to be uncomfortable. If you want to build your mind to make it tougher, you've got to do something that's tougher. So I got up early, say, quarter, 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and you know what it would be like over there, pitch black and running through those canals and everything. So I thought, this is the day, and I'll get out and I'll get into this. So I think we had 26 players on that tour. I reckon 24 of them were out doing the same thing. It just proved to me that the champion players of our game, they do more. Even the blessed blokes, and I'm talking about blokes like Andrew Johnsons and Darren Lockyers and that, they all do more. It's not enough to use what God gave you. The extrapolation of that is work ethic. And once I cornered that, well then I was right. Then I knew how to do what coaches want, and that is, you don't have to be the best player, but you've got to be consistent. You've got to bring what you've got, and you've got to bring it every time so they can rely on it. And that's all I did. I never was the bloke who set the world on fire and all the rest of it, but I could do my job and I could keep doing it. And that's what I made the thing that I thought, if I'm going to have a footy career, it's going to be based on that. And that's all it was.
Well, the success came from that too. You mentioned, being selected to play for Australia. The premierships then started coming with the Super League in 97 and following it up in 98. Yep. But then Origin, what was in your mind, once you got selected to play for your country and once you started getting that success from that work, when did Origin come onto your radar?
Origin always was. It's just that obviously the Super League year came first and I was picked to play for Queensland. Now that was the magic word for me, Queensland. Not Origin, Queensland. Because I was obsessed about that my whole life. So when I got picked to play on that side, that was my Queensland debut. And the record books won't see it that way, and no one else sees it that way, and I don't care. But that's when I started my career as a Queensland player. And it meant as much to me to play on that side as it did in any one of the other sides I ever played for. But it was an enormous thing because, and hopefully I told that story well enough about the first Queensland side being Origin. It was an enormous thing for me to think that I could play for Queensland. Even when I was playing for the Broncos then. So I'd climbed that hill.
Daunting?
It was frightening because I'd put it on a pedestal all my life. I'd put it up there. And that's where it belongs, by the way. So when I got in there, I wasn't disappointed with how it felt because it was up there. And even in that side, and the great late Peter Jackson was our fitness bloke. He was mad. And all the things that were part of the legendary days of Origin, the drink and that, it was all part of that too. I just thought it was the greatest thing that I'm ever going to do. I really thought that this is it. This is the pinnacle. And that was before I played State of Origin and walked into, I was with Choppy Close the other day and I told him this story and he remembers it, but my introduction to Origin as such, so forget about the Super League stuff, it was wonderful and I'll never discount that. But then they put the competitions back together and you go on to play for Queensland now. But this is everyone who's available for Queensland is going to play in this one. So it was the same thing. It felt the same. And I'm going into the Travelodge, the old Travelodge when it still existed. We were staying there. And I was walking in and I was so bloody nervous. And I'd played in that side the year before, but I was still so bloody nervous because this was the State of Origin. Anyway, so I get in there. And press the button on the lift, and I'm trying to get up to where we got to go without seeing anyone because I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was scared. Intimidated is the word. Anyway, the lift opens up, and who should be there? Choppy. I knew who Chris Close was, but I wasn't going to say hello because I just thought I put my head down straight away, which I'm not like that really, but I just was overawed, right? Anyway, I jumped in there and we must have said an awkward g'day in it and nothing much was getting said. And Choppy looked at me and he said, are you hungry? I said, I could eat. So we went to the buffet and chowed down for an hour and had a great yarn. And that was my introduction. I love Choppy and that he sort of cut a bit of a track for me then because he settled me down and then I felt okay. And he sort of more or less said, mate, you wouldn't be here unless you deserve to be here. He said, so don't feel intimidated by it, don't do that. He said, you're meant to be here. He said, behave like it. I said, righto. And hopefully I did that.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Nate Miles, who played over 30 games. You played over 20. When did you feel comfortable? Did you feel as though you belong? Never.
And I think that's the point, right? Every year that you got picked, you were thankful that you did. And the hardest thing I ever had to do, I had to retire from playing Origin football. It was the hardest thing I've ever done because I didn't want to, and I was probably still playing good enough. But this knee of mine, which I'd carried my whole career, it was buggered. And I knew I was running out of the one thing that I needed to continue to be the player that I got picked in the Origin side for, is I was starting not to be able to train as well as I could. And I knew that was the start of the end, and I couldn't do both. I couldn't stay a good club player and be a good Origin player as well, and I knew I couldn't, or at least I wasn't willing to risk it. And I had to stop. They wanted to pick me, Michael Hagan was the coach, and he rang me because they were out of front rows. There was injuries, right, and they needed front row. And I was back playing club, and I was playing well. And he rang me and he said, mate, we'd played Newcastle actually, and he said, mate, would you come back? And I said, mate, I can't. I said, I've said that I'm doing this, and I cannot go back on it because this is a thing. This is a country value thing, and it's just ingrained into me. You do what you say what you do, and all the rest of it. And I said, mate, I can't. I said, I want to. I want to more than you know. I said, but I just can't do it. That was the hardest thing I ever had about playing for Queensland. I never felt relaxed. I never felt like, oh, okay, this is me. I'm this. No. When I went into that side, I thought, I was nervous about getting my job done because I knew if I didn't do my job, we'd potentially lose, and that was no good. It had been ingrained into us from the likes of Choppy and that this is bloody important. We treat this properly.
You've won premierships, you've played test matches, but what's it like running out across the road in a Queensland jersey in front of Queensland fans?
It is without exception, the most spine-tingling moment ever. And it never got old either. Running out here for Queensland. Running out here for the Broncos was always special too, and played a game for Australia here as well, was great, but not like playing here for Queensland. It means something to this state that we go out and do that, and it is enormous. And very quickly that feeling goes away because then you're in an Origin match and she's a war. But running out to that, you always were well received with the crowd. It was amazing.
A lot of the players, Webby, talk about how quick Origin is. Did you find that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think us as front rowers find it even quicker. Don't worry, because we're the big blokes trying to get around. I think the real difference is, it's no quicker than club footy, but it starts, club footy and Origin footy start about the same pace. Origin doesn't slow down. That's what changes. Footy can only be played at the pace it's played at, and, all the clubs are all trained the same way and all the rest of it. So that it's not that it's faster. It's faster for longer. It's faster the whole game. So you just don't get those breaks.
Looking back at your time in Origin, played with some wonderful players for and against, what sort of stands out from that era for you in Origin football?
I think, our era of the Queensland side, we didn't have great success. We weren't, I retired from Origin just about when Queensland got on their run. Probably why they got on their run. But anyway, so we had mixed sort of results in that. But I think about the players. I got to play with Alf, and on the other side of the coin, there were blokes like Andrew Eddinghaus and blokes that I'd actually grown up watching. Because they were all getting on the tail end of their careers, both as footballers but also Origin players, and so I was lucky enough to have knocked around with a bit of that era and Lazo playing for New South Wales. I mean that's a fairly, and the chief Paul Harrigan. These blokes were blokes I had watched, and I'm doing battle with them. It astounded me that. The other thing I think about that era is because Lang Park was still Lang Park. It hadn't turned into Suncorp. It did inside, but I played an Origin on Lang Park, not Suncorp Stadium, and I'll always be grateful about that because I think that might have even been my first game, but it was enormous, and it was that electric old feeling with the old stands and everything still, and oh man, it was remarkable. And I don't often think about it, but when I'm asked to talk about Origin, I forget that was the case and how good that was. And it just, I think every era of Origin has its standouts and all the rest of it. And I think the game was starting to change a bit too. Like the game was starting to morph a bit into more what it was today. And so there was a lot of changes inside the 7 or 8 years that I was playing. The game was starting to really pick up pace too and played at such a click, at such a rate and everything. So, but I just thought, mate, I'm just glad I was there.
A lot of people remember the broken arm in the 2006 grand final, one of the legendary grand final moments, but you managed to play basically 21 Origin games straight. So you had a career whereby, as a front rower playing Origin, playing for the Brisbane Broncos, that you're able to keep backing up. How?
So now I'm gonna say this because I can't help it, right? I told you about playing for Queensland. I count the other 3 games as well. And I played those 3 in a row. So I always say 24 in a row. That's only in my mind.
Yep.
And I understand the distinction, I really do. But in my mind, they were the same. It was as important to me. But yeah, that's what I said, right? At the start of my career, I had all the good luck in the world to get started, right? But that stayed with me. And throughout my whole career, I had bugger all injuries. I had and to play all those Origins in succession, and it wasn't like I had to carry injury and that. I didn't. I was pretty much fit. Like playing the grand final, the broken arm. That was one time that I battled on with injury, but for the most part, I didn't get a lot wrong, and I don't know why that is. Luck is what it is. But certainly to have played them together, and I never really thought about it because it just became normal. Okay, we're playing footy this year and we start off with the Bronx. Oh yeah, then it's Origin. And not that I just assumed that I could get picked, but when you did, you thought, right, time to go and do this job. And the other thing, I suppose, at the same time, we're always given the option. If we wanted to back up and play the club game, so we played Origin on the Wednesday, we're playing on a Friday or Sunday, we're always given the option, you want to play, play. I always played because I loved it. And I always loved playing after the Origin because I was a very nervous bloke about football because every game was proper important. Like, and that's the same for everyone, but I just got nervous about that because I wanted to do my job and do it well. I found that the Origin would take all the sting out of the nerves, and so then you could go and play the club footy. And I loved being as relaxed as it made me feel, because I always felt like I played good in those club games after the Origins. And particularly if you've come out of a good Origin, then you just take that momentum, if you like, but also that confidence into the club game that weekend. So I loved that time of year, and I loved being involved and being able to, and like people look at it like it was a big workload, but it wasn't particularly. That's all we're doing. So you're conditioned to that, but certainly loved that part of it.
Well, you mentioned 2006 to the arm. What got you over the line then? Were you ever not going to play in that grand final?
So that was 2000.
2000.
Yeah, 2006 was the last one. But the 2000 grand final, I'm not sure that I should have played, to be honest. The thing was, Benny being Benny, he was so compassionate and empathetic about the whole thing. He told me, the great Ron Massey was there, God rest his soul, one of the great blokes in the world. Anyway, I'd gone down for the preliminary final because I couldn't play in the preliminary final. To play in the grand final was 5 weeks into a 12-week recovery. Anyway, so I'd done everything possible, and like it was coming good, and it was okay, but it wasn't great, and I thought I'm probably not going to play, but the club took me down to play, took me down for the preliminary final, and I'd bought all my gear. I don't know why, because I was never going to play, but I didn't know anyway. So I had my gear with me. And anyway, Wayne had said we were having breakfast, and we were talking about it, and we were talking about whether I was going to play in this game. It came up, and then all of a sudden, am I playing or not? So I've said that a bit wrong actually. I was always going to play in the preliminary final. Always was going to try to, and I'd gone down. And so anyway, so it was in question. That's right. This is why this come about. And so Ron Massey was there, Kevy was captain, and Wayne's there, and everyone else had left breakfast, and I was there sweating bullets because I couldn't decide whether to play or not. And the only thing I was worried about, I wasn't worried about my arm, I wasn't worried about anything. I just didn't want to go out and fail. And by failure, what I thought could happen, the doctor told me this, like it was cracked, you could see it and all the rest of it. If he got hit hard enough again, it was possibly going to break in half and it would not be usable, right? And I thought, I don't want to be the reason that we lose a preliminary final. Anyway, sweating bullets and all the rest of it, and I really didn't want to play because I thought I'm just not ready. And Wayne said, well, I'll make this easy for you. Either you play in the preliminary final or you're not playing in the grand final if we make it. And I said, righto, Wayne, looks like I'm playing today then, doesn't it? Anyway, so I went and played, and I actually went all right that week, and that was enormously difficult. Went all right, played my role, put it that way. What was harder was the week of the grand final because, okay, that's all gone away. Now he's normal again. I wasn't normal. That arm of mine was sore that week. It was terrible. And it was a much harder week. I was doing it tough. It was aching. I couldn't sleep. But everyone else had moved on. Oh, no, he's past that now. He's played the preliminary final. She's all good. He's played in the grand final. Of course, it all came back with this because I carried this in the grand final. I watched it, mate. I carried it. I couldn't use it. And so the harder week was the preliminary final. But there's the go. Like we went out, we got the job done, and now I get to tell this story all over the place. I love it.
What about a highlight from the Origin career? And you can include the 3 for Super League as well. Yeah,
well, okay, in that case, I scored a try in the Super League as well.
So 2 tries.
I scored 2 tries in my Queensland career. The try was my highlight. The other highlight has got to be for Origin, right? It's got to be when I was picked. It's just got to be. And you might think, well, okay, you would have expected it. I didn't expect it. And
how did you find out in those days?
How did we find out? I think Wayne might have told us. I think they told the club, and because we always had a fair contingent, and they told us all together. So it wasn't. I don't think. Yeah, I'm not sure. But the other thing. This meant a lot to me. And this will sound weird, because I love wearing number 8, and I got picked in number 8, and that actually meant a lot to me. Shouldn't do, should it? But 8 was the number that I'd played in the Bronx, and that, you know, when I got to it, and I loved it. And I just thought, it's one of those superstitious things that footballers carry on about. I just thought 8's the number I play best in, which is nonsense, but that's what I thought. And I got picked in that, and so yeah, it was special.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
Wayne Bennett, by a mile, by a country mile. I wouldn't have been a footballer if it wasn't for him. And I wouldn't have had half my life, which I've got, if it wasn't for him. In every way possible, like when my father left us, like he became a stand-in. And not in a stupid way, not in an emotional way. Benny's not like that, I'm not like that. But he just became a person who I could rely on in a sense of being able to rely on a dad. And that's what he was like. And that meant that he was hard on me when he needed to be too. And that was quite regularly. And that's the gift of the man. Is that he can give you all the care and attention and empathy and sympathy and all the rest of it, but he will kick you on the arse when you need it. And that's what we all need in this world. We need more, as much as we need it when we need the other stuff, we need the harder stuff too. And he dished it out in equal measurements.
So what do you reckon the kid from Leyburn, who bare feet at a 5 or 6 year old playing footy, would have thought if he knew at the time he was going to play over 20 games for Queensland, test matches for Australia, World Cup success, 4 premierships with the Broncos. As you reflect sitting here today on your career, Shane Webcke, how do you reflect on your career?
I've always felt really, really lucky. And I guess all players would say that, but mine was luck. And it's not me being modest saying that, it was luck. Because if Wayne doesn't go to watch Pricey play, I don't get that day. It doesn't come. Because I really hadn't, and whatever Wayne saw that day, and I've watched the game back now, someone actually, a miracle way back then, had taped that game and I saw it. And I did a couple of weird things that day, but anyway, I don't say this lightly, I would not have been a footballer if Wayne isn't there that day. It just wouldn't have happened. I'd lost sight of that and I was not picking it back up. And whilst, Wayne saw, and remember too, he's the only one who saw it that day. There wasn't anyone else saying, oh, that's Shane Webcke, he'll go on. No one else was saying that day. So Wayne saw something and he actually thought that he'd got it wrong. And he told me that. and like, which he said after I'd got somewhere, but he said, I'd given up on you. He said, I thought I'd just made a mistake. I saw something that wasn't there. So all of that adds up to like the other overriding emotion I get about my footy career is sadness because my dad wasn't around to see it. Now, anyone would say that. It wouldn't matter if your dad loved, hated footy, all the rest of it. It's just that I would have liked both my parents to have seen, what they gave me amounted to. Because, mate, the other thing is I don't get there without having my parents, but I don't get there without having the parents that I had, who taught us such hard lessons around working and all that stuff. It was natural for me to work as hard as it took. It was absolutely natural because that's the way we'd been raised. And then it was also natural to be grateful for it because that's the way we were raised as well. And so I'll rave about my mother and father all day long. Were they perfect parents? No, they were not. Was my dad a perfect bloke? No, he was not. I'm just sad that he didn't get to see it. It would have been really interesting too, because my dad was a bloke who'd yell out from the sideline and embarrass his sons and all the rest of it. So, you know what? We laugh about it sometimes too, because we think what would have been like if Dad had a rock. And my father was not a man given to social etiquette. What he would have been like let loose amongst all of this, I do not know. It would have been nice to find out though.
Well, Fog number 105, Shane Webcke, thanks so much for your time and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thanks, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Fog's Queenslander podcast. If there's a Fog you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.